Hey, welcome to the Sound of Truth podcast. This is officially episode number 1. Our previous 2 episodes were introductory episodes, which we introduced the team, one of whom is not with us today because he is working. We're going to be honest. We had been in contract negotiations with him, and he has decided, no, I'm kidding. No, Chase, my son, my 18-year-old son, is at work today. So, and I think he's going to miss next week as well with a college entrance exam. So,
priorities, Chase.
Yeah, I know. What's up with that? So, but he'll be back, and we have in his place a special studio guest. We got 2 special guests this week on the podcast. We have Justice Colby in the studio. Justice, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I'm telling you what, to have someone visiting his folks here in town, his dad's an elder at our church. He's actually in Nashville, Tennessee, where he's in school to be a sound engineer. And so the perfect person to have in here early in the podcast to help us know where to put our microphones, what we didn't know in previous weeks.
Right. It was like the first 2 minutes he was here, I learned like 3 things.
So great to have you helping us out on the sound today, Justice. So, and also a little later in the program, we got our first special guest in terms of someone we're going to interview, Lee Corning. We're going to talk to him. And here's the thing about Lee. He read the entire Bible in 6 days. So, and also this being our first official episode number 1, we are beginning our 3-year journey through the entire Word of God. In this episode, we're going to talk about Genesis chapters 1 through 11. We're hoping you've read that in preparation for this podcast episode. And then I'll be preaching on it a couple days on Sunday at a Harvest Jacksonville as well. So 3-year journey starts off right now. Very excited about it. We're glad you've joined us, and welcome to the program. All right, so this is our first official episode number 1. We wanted episode number 1 to coincide with our journey through the scriptures, our first section of scripture we talk about, which is Genesis 1 through 11. But, in our previous episode, we talked about the importance of goals and how goals are superior to resolutions. And here we are. This podcast drops on January the 8th, Friday, January 8th. And so January 8th, this is right about the time that people are failing in their resolutions.
They're feeling the struggle.
January 9, if I remember correctly from the research, your average person gives up their resolution on January the 9th is the average day. So tomorrow, all kinds of people are going to be quitting, and they're not going to make it to the next episode.
Not you guys.
No.
All the other people.
That's because you guys aren't even making resolutions, because that goals are the way to go.
Nice.
And we got a little bit of feedback from folks, and would love to continue to get more feedback from people from what are your goals, because you're into that now. We're into the new year, and people are pursuing their goals, and so that was neat to see. We'd love to get more feedback from folks on that. So, hey, any goal you want to share or anything you had in mind that
I ran 3 miles yesterday.
Oh, great.
One of my goals this year, I kind of wanted to do like good habits, incorporating more, run 6 miles a week. So yesterday, I ran 3 miles.
Good for you.
So I've got to run another 3 miles today.
You're halfway there.
There you go. And the way that I was tracking my week is this first week of the year, will only be 2 days.
Yeah.
So I've got to get 6 in 2 days, whereas every other week I can get 6 within 7 days.
That makes sense. Or you can just give yourself some mercy.
No mercy.
No mercy mode right out of the gates.
That's right.
Good. So,
what's the opposite of cold turkey? Like, people say they're going to go cold turkey and they're going to completely stop something. I'm doing the opposite, where I'm going to go hot turkey. I'm going to completely drench the turkey in that hot oil. You got to just jump in.
Or hot chicken.
Hot chicken, maybe.
Speaking of chicken, I am on the edge of publicly pronouncing my top 5 chicken sandwiches. I've been working on this for like 15 months. Ever since the whole Popeyes craze 15 months ago or whatever that was, I've been trying out chicken sandwiches from fast food restaurants, and I'm up to like number 27 or so over the past, COVID threw us off, and I went several months without having a chicken sandwich.
Right.
But then I got back into it and been reviewing them for my blog, BrettEats.com. Yes, I have
Check it out.
official foodie blog, BrettEats.com. And I am about to reveal my top 5, but I've been struggling a little bit on my 1, 2, 3. So I'm not going to tell you right now.
But you got 4 or 5 is locked in. You know 4 and 5.
Actually, the whole 5. I mean, it's pretty interesting. What do you think is the one thing that was clearly that I learned about fast food restaurants and chicken sandwiches in terms of who makes a good chicken sandwich?
What is the biggest takeaway regarding chicken sandwiches in fast food?
It's kind of like your rule of thumb about getting a chicken sandwich at a fast food restaurant. This one thing will reveal, are you going to get a decent one or not?
Interesting. I don't even know what is the one. What's the one thing?
Yeah. So the one thing is it a chicken restaurant?
Really?
If it's a burger
that
joint,
simple?
It is that simple. As a whole, there is one very popular. I don't know if they're national, but they're definitely across the Southeast. I think they started out Georgia. So there's one company that does not make a good chicken sandwich, and they're chicken people. It's a chicken place. Mm-hmm. But other than that, almost all your chicken places make a good chicken sandwich, and almost all of your burger places make a bad chicken sandwich. That's what I'm saying.
I can definitely believe that for sure.
Yeah.
Now here's the
I have one big surprise though. There's 2 places known for burgers that are competing for my top 5 currently. So I'll reveal those at another time. But one was a big surprise. I couldn't believe they made a really good chicken sandwich. And then the other place I was not surprised because everything they do is really good. And I'll tell you that, and that's Culver's. Culver's, everything they do is good. So they make crack my top 5. Mm-hmm. The other place I was surprised by. But all the other popular fast food burger joints, they don't know how to make a chicken sandwich. They just need to stay out of the business of chicken sandwiches.
Gotcha. Well, in other news, it's completely unrelated. This week, we are supported by Culver's. Just kidding.
Not
just kidding.
So,
yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah,
that's got to be whenever that comes out, we're gonna that'll be.
I'll go public, and then I'll come and share the results on here as well.
And then we're gonna need to go to these people and ask them to support our.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Support the podcast.
We're going to send a lot of business.
We're in this for the money.
We're going to send a lot of
we
business.
are in this for the money, right? So, all right. Enough about chicken. I'm thankful that we can eat chicken. It's in the diet. It's biblical. Mm-hmm. So, but let's go ahead and dive into our Bible discussion. Well, I'll tell you what, though. Let's take a quick break.
Let's take a quick break.
And then we'll come back and we'll talk about Genesis 1 through 11.
While we do this break, pop into the comments and tell us your favorite chicken sandwich.
Yes, please do. All right. Yep. All right. We're back, and we are going to talk about Genesis 1 through 11. 11 chapters, starting the Bible off, and are really, these chapters are very significant to understanding the rest of Scripture.
Foundational.
They are foundational, without a doubt. Think about this. We have in Genesis 1 through 11 the explanation for why everything is, because God created everything.
How everything is.
How everything is. And maybe not fully the why, but that comes later in Scripture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but this is a section of firsts, okay? But before I get into the different firsts, I want to point out that it covers a tremendous amount of history as well. In these 11 chapters, think about this. There's 4,100 years of recorded Bible history. That's the Scriptures cover a span of 4,100 years in terms of what's being dealt with, and over half of that is in the book of Genesis.
Right.
Genesis covers over half of those years. That's, to be very specific, 2,286 years. And then 2,000 of those 2,286 years are covered in Genesis 1 through 11.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Like half?
Yeah, so there's 50 chapters in Genesis. No, I'm saying...
You said, well, if there's 4,000 recorded years, that's in the whole Bible.
4,100. So little less than half of it is in Genesis 1 through 11.
Right.
Because you cover about 2,000 years from Adam to Abraham. And then there's only about 280 something years between Abraham and the end of the book of Genesis with the patriarchs, with his sons and grandsons, etc. So that, 12 through 50, that's a lot of chapters compared to 1 through 11. And it's just under 300 years, but then you got 2,000 years from Genesis 1 through Genesis 11. So, and then the New Testament, of course, only covers less than 100 years.
Yeah.
So it becomes more specific as you go.
It's zooming in.
It's zooming in. That's right.
Yeah.
So you have several firsts. You have the first humans. You have
the first everything.
The first everything, right? You have the first humans. You have the first days of history. You have the first sin or sins. Depends on how you're going to look at the fall. Is it one sin that Adam and Eve both committed, or is it two sins they each committed? However you look at it, we go singular with the fall.
Yeah.
This was the plunge into why things are messed up. This is the explanation from the Christian worldview as to why we have sorrow and brokenness and sin and strife and all the bad things that happen in this world and in this universe, literally. It all goes back to this one thing that happened in Genesis chapter 3.
Toil,
Yeah. 1 and 2, life was paradise. It was perfect. It was heaven. And then chapter 3, sin enters into the picture, into the world. God allowed it. We don't know fully why he allowed it other than for his glory. That's kind of the big answer.
The kind of catch-all.
Yeah. But the first sense, then from out of that, the first judgments, again in Genesis 3, God pronounces judgment upon the serpent. The three primary players in this drama, the fourth being God himself, of course, but involved in the sin aspect. The serpent was in the garden. He tempted Eve, who then shared with her husband Adam. They committed these first sins or sin of breaking God's law and plunged all of human history into this turmoil that we now have to live with. So he's pronouncing the judgments upon them in Genesis chapter 3. So the first judgments.
The first death.
The first death, the animals are slain to cover
their,
Adam and Eve's nakedness. Then you have the next chapter, you have the first murder, where Cain kills Abel. You've got the first global judgment in Genesis 1 through 11, the flood. There's all these firsts that occur in Genesis 1 through 11. That makes it very, very significant. But the two most important, or my two favorite firsts, are found in these two scriptures. One's in Genesis 3, one's in Genesis 4. Genesis 3:15 is the first reference to the gospel of Jesus Christ, called the first evangelium, first good news. The first good news is in the judgment that God is pronouncing to the serpent in Genesis 3:15. I'm going to just read here from the King James Version. It says, "And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance..." That's wrong chapter. Genesis chapter 3. I was in Genesis chapter 4. Genesis 3:15. The Lord says, "And I will put enmity between thee," that is the serpent, "and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel." And putting it in modern language, the seed of the woman is going to crush Satan.
Right.
And that is Jesus and what he did on the cross. This is what this is. This is the first reference to this coming Messiah.
Yeah.
It's the best first in the Bible.
It's prophetic, right? Because it even mentions he doesn't get out of it unscathed, right? He has a bruise on his heel, which is, small
the
thing,
cross.
but he's on the cross, right?
But he wins the ultimate victory.
Exactly. So it's prophetic in how it's turned out there.
First prophecy of Christ crucified for us. Genesis chapter 3. The other, this one's not my favorite, but it'd be my second favorite in Genesis 1 through 11 in terms of firsts, is in Genesis chapter 4, the last phrase in the chapter. And that is, you've had this horrible murder, and with Cain and Abel in that chapter. That's what most people think of. But a lot of people miss this final little statement where it says, "Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord."
Right. The sons of Seth.
Yeah. Then began men to call upon the name of the Lord. This is the first reference to people seeking the Lord through prayer. that's significant as well. We see very early here, people are seeing the brokenness of the world, and they're saying we need the Lord, and they're calling out to Him, which is something all of us must do. We all got to reach a point in our lives where we see that we need the Lord, and then we cry out to Him. And of course, the good news is He always responds. He loves to hear the cries of His people, as we'll see again in Exodus chapter 2, when we get to Exodus, when it said the nation of Israel, they were crying out to the Lord, and the Lord heard their cries. And the Lord was already preparing a deliverer for them in the person of Moses at that time. And here we have in Genesis 3:15, the Lord is already preparing for the seed of the woman to be the deliverer for His people. In Genesis chapter 4, we see them start to cry out to Him. So He's available when we cry out to Him. Anyway, what did you get out of reading Genesis 1 through 11? I know you read Genesis 1 through 11.
Well, it's kind of like what you were saying there. There's so many big foundational stories. I mean, we've hit on a bunch of them, Noah and the flood. And, it's interesting that, like 2 or 3 chapters are devoted to the whole Noah story. But the one that always stands out to me is, I think it's chapter 11, talking about the Tower of Babel. Mm-hmm. And I remember the very first time I was reading through the Bible, I remember I had, very little knowledge. I was just doing it on my own, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm reading through the Bible, and I get to the Tower of Babel, and you get this idea where, mankind is coming together. They're arm in arm. They're working on a project together. It's bringing them unity.
Seems like a good thing.
In my mind, I was.
Right.
I was like, of course it's a good thing. They're making this giant tower. And then in the story, you hear, it says, God came down from heaven and He looked down on what men were doing. And my mind at the time was thinking, and He's going to be, yes, good job. Everybody's working together, But it's the complete opposite. I've got to confuse their language. Mm-hmm. And there's something here that, and I was talking about this in the break, that I'd love to dig into. Like if I had to preach a message and really dig into a passage, it would be this passage. And the Bible that I'm reading out of does not have the verses, so forgive me. It's in chapter 11. It says,
when he says it doesn't have the verses, you're not
the
saying
verse numbers.
Yes. The verse number references. You've got a reader's Bible, which is trying to remove all the distractions that are usually in our Bibles.
Right. And it says, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. And if you stop right there, you're like, wow, see the power of humankind when we work together in unity. Yeah. There's nothing we can't do together.
That's a great thing.
Yeah, and then the very next verse is, come, let us go down and confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. And I remember the first time I read that, I was like, wait, what?
Right.
Why
isn't God for this?
Right. Why? So a part of me, having now read it and having some more time to, having years now to have considered it, and I'd love to get your take on this, but prior to this, at the end of Noah, the Noah story, He's saying, I want you to go and spread throughout the whole world. I want you to go and populate everything. And mankind was doing the exact opposite. Instead of spreading God's image, we're all made in God's image. I want God's image all over the whole world. Instead, they were going, no, we're going to stay right here, and we're going to build this tower, and we're going to build it up to heaven so that we can take God's place. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that part of the story, you only hear a part of it, and you're just like, wait, why is God angry at this, that everybody's working together? Nowadays, that's all we ever talk about. Like, we just need to come together and work together. And
right. Unity.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing, but in this case, God had specifically told them, I want you to go and fill the whole world.
Their unity was, and like you say, when you're reading the story, it comes as a surprise. I remember struggling with the exact same thing when I read this passage. I'm like, this all looks so good. And isn't that maybe why the author presented it in this way? To kind of help us identify with, we're identifying really with the antagonist in the story, the anti-hero. Right. But we're identifying with that because it seems good to us as well, which is helping us to realize some things that seem good aren't good.
That's good.
If they are not aligned with the Lord.
Some things are good aren't good, and then I immediately say that's good.
And we see this a lot today, don't we, with people saying, this seems good, this seems right.
Right.
And things aren't always what they seem. What seems to us good and what makes logical sense to us is something that's positive. If we're leaving the Lord completely out of it,
Right.
and if especially what it is goes against what he has revealed and said, then no matter how good it seems, it's not good.
Right. And our heart is deceitfully wicked. What man can know it?
Right?
Yeah.
Jeremiah. So the thing of it is, they were employing good principles to the wrong ends.
Yeah.
Unity is a good thing when it's devoted to the right things. But they were, and I don't know, I don't recall you making reference to it, but also in this chapter, it makes reference to the fact that part of the reason was there in verse 4. Let us make us a name. They were doing it for their own glory.
Yes. Yeah.
It was about them. And so then you get into motives. What are the motives of us working together? Working together is a positive thing. But what are the reasons? What are the goals? What are the motives? In this case, it was against what he had told them to do. It was the opposite. And their motive was their own glory rather than God's glory. And God says, I love them enough that I'm going to mess this up.
Yes.
He could have let them continue on and continue to see how much they could accomplish and be filled with pride and not think they need the Lord.
Right.
But instead, you know, sometimes the most loving thing God can do for us is to cause us to fail so that we'll look up to him rather than to ourselves.
Yeah.
So pride is one of the greatest barriers of knowing and walking with the Lord. And this is definitely an example of a story of pride. So well, any more thoughts on that? I mean, obviously you picked that story out. I think it's a great story.
Yeah. There's so much, and I guess I was trying to choose something that I wanted to kind of highlight, which is kind of off the beaten path. I don't think many people really do the Tower of Babel or that kind of it's almost like a throwaway verse where it says, if you know, there's nothing that will be impossible to them.
Right.
Which a part of me is like, oh, that's so motivational.
Right.
And yet it's being used in, you know, in the wrong way. So.
All right, good. Well, hey, read Genesis 12 through 20 for next week. Take a short break. We'll be right back.
God does all things well.
All right, we're back. And we have a special guest on this episode, Lee Corning. We're talking to him. He's in Austin, Texas, originally from Chicagoland. Lee, you and I are native Illinoisans. I guess that makes us me being from Southern Illinois, you being from the Chicago area. But we're glad to have you on the program, Lee. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, appreciate you having me. And, you know, I'm glad we could work out the timing. As you start down this podcast journey, you'll see the hardest thing about doing it is getting your guests to do what they said they'll do. So good luck to you.
Well, I appreciate that, bud. I really do. So you have been a Christian. Tell us real briefly, Lee, when you became a Christian. I know you have a Christian heritage. But just give us a little bit of background there to help set up what we want to ask you about, which is the big headline for you coming on our show is you read the entire Bible in 6 days. So that's where we're going with this. But tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I am. My conversion story occurs in Awana, or as a function of Awana, as a very young guy. I'd say 5 or 6. I know it would be 5 exactly because I was in Cubbies at the time. But just broad strokes is you start to understand what death is at a very young age, and you start to grapple with that with your miniature mind. And there's an easy solution, and I just so happened to be growing up around it and learning all about that solution. And it was just that was my start. And obviously, anytime that's someone's story, there's starts and stops and greater depths of understanding that occur as you mature and sometimes demature. Is a harsh reality of the Christian life, but so that's my background, and I can go into any greater depth in any direction you want on that, but that's the general gist.
So, just for those who aren't aware, Awana is a program for children where they learn the scriptures and memorize scriptures, and it's in many churches across the country. It's a national organization based there out of the Chicagoland, right?
I don't know where they're based, but I knew that if you didn't have your verses memorized that week, there would be some penalty.
Yes. I remember Awanas, and I remember specifically needing to memorize, those verses.
So it's a bore fruit in your life. So you were raised in a Christian home.
It did.
You went off to Liberty University, where you got a degree and played some basketball there. Is that right?
Yeah, I always mention the caveat because it was always my goal to play Division I college basketball. I had a couple hiccups along the way, but did play at Liberty. But I was no superstar. I always say I was everyone's favorite backup point guard. So
All right.
I spent a lot of time on the bench and a lot of time on a practice floor. Not too terribly much time on that actual floor, though.
Gotcha. So that brings us to, you came to Jacksonville for a period of time, so that's where we became friends. Of course, we had the connection through our network of churches as well, with your dad being heavily involved in Harvest in Chicago, et cetera. So, but you tell us what led you to come up with this idea of wanting to kind of like speed read the entire Bible. We're really pushing here on the podcast and promoting reading through the scriptures, and we're initiating this episode a 3-year journey. In this episode, we're going to talk about Genesis 1 through 11, and then we're going to continue on through the whole Bible over the next 3 years. So this is a major emphasis for us, is we want to really encourage people to read the Word of God. And here, a lot of people are challenged by the Word of God and in terms of reading it, and think they can't read. It's just such a large book. It's a long read in a lot of people's minds, and a lot of people have tried and failed, but we want to encourage it. And I thought it would just be great to bring you on and say, hey, here's a guy who did it in 6 days. It's kind of like, what's our excuse? So what caused you to even think about doing this? I'd never heard anything like this before.
Yeah. So, we originally talked about this, I think it was in 2016. And, in preparation for our conversation today, I went and read that blog post, and I was thinking, man, the Lee Corning that wrote this feels like a guy that I knew a long time ago. But yeah, it was an exercise in a commitment to like the things I knew that were right. And I had been reading lots of other books. I think the book that I was specifically reading at the time was the Steve Jobs book that had come out several years back. You might remember that. Mm-hmm. He had just passed away. It was big news. His narrative was in fashion at the time. So read that book, and I was like, I don't really care about this book, but I just kept on going because I was 2/3 done. I didn't want to. You don't want to have a book on your shelf you haven't read. So I was just kind of plowing through it, and I got to the end, and I thought this was a kind of a waste of time. No disrespect to Steve Jobs or Apple fans. That's an easy toe to step on the internet, Brett. So don't make fun of Apple fans on your podcast. But it was just something where I was thinking, all right, if I can read these books of this size, and I just finished. My sister and I read Atlas Shrugged, and that's a 1,400 page book, and other books that are similar size, just like cultural classics and things, just to have an idea of what's out in the world. And I have like 10 copies of the Bible on my shelf, and it just struck me that I had never read that book cover to cover, and that yet I claim to have this book as my sole driver. And I just was like, all right, we need to get this handled right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this wasn't, I don't think I remember that part of your story. And by the way, he's making reference, just a few minutes ago, you made reference to the fact that I've interviewed you before for my blog on this subject. I emailed you the questions, you agreed to do it, and then you emailed me the answers back, and then I posted it. It's one of my favorite interviews on my blog I've done. It's still on our pastorbrett.com/soundoftruth.org website, if the listeners want to look that up. And so I don't remember that detail that you had not read through the whole Bible up to that point. So this was part of your motivation.
Yeah. So like if you've come through the church like I have, and you've been around it your whole life, you've read the entire Bible at some level in some capacity, or like we're part of a program where you read, just the Old Testament or just the New Testament or the Pentateuch, but then you read the Minor Prophets later. Like you could piece together my Bible reading and be like, you read the whole thing.
Right.
But I had never given that commitment to the Bible that I had given to this Steve Jobs book 20 minutes ago. And I was like, all right, this feels off. I better get into this. And it was right in that time between Christmas and New Year's that we're kind of walking through right now,
Yes.
where you have a little bit of extra time. I didn't have kids at the time too, which for those of you that don't have kids, you think you don't have time now, wait till you do have kids, because then you will really have no time.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, I have the opportunity to do this, and I know that when I sit and I just look at a book for 10 hours, like I can drone off, I can read fast, I could be flipping through 10 pages and not be fully understanding what I'm reading. Just that drone on thing. So I went over to Audible and I downloaded I think it was an ESV version of audio, and then I just grabbed a 25-cent copy of the Bible that was in the same not translation, but what we call version on Amazon, and then just read them together for the duration of the book. And it was my favorite experience I've had with any book, because it was special because of the commitment it takes, the time it takes. I was trying to do it fast. And yeah, that was how that went originally.
Okay, so you decide this is something you're going to do, and we want to continue this in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break and be back with Lee Corning.
Show me more of you and open up my eyes.
All right, we're back with Lee Corning, who I don't know anyone else personally who read through the entire Bible in 6 days. And Lee, you were just sharing with us your motivations for doing it, but tell us a little bit about the process. How did you pull this off? What was it like in terms of the game plan, and you did it?
Yeah, so I've mentioned to you before that I used an audio version of the Bible that you can just grab on Audible.com. There's a bunch of different versions. Some of them are a little more theatrical than others. Quite frankly, I like the theatrical ones because you're looking for as much, kind of. I don't know. I was going to use the word, pop for this marathon run here.
So multiple
enjoyed that.
readers in that dramatic version, that type of thing.
Yes, and I really like that because it's really easy to decipher between who the speaker is.
Right.
So, like if you're reading, especially in the Old Testament, the voice of God shows up pretty often, and then there's the characters. So if you're not 100% certain of speaker switch, you can feel like this is someone talking or this is God talking, or you're not sure, and that just makes it a harder process. So you want to iron out as much of the hardness you can for this type of thing. So I really enjoyed that, and then I follow along in the actual book, and then if you ever get to those points, like what's the number one thing, Brett, people tell you why they say they can't read?
Yeah, they get to Leviticus and they get,
Numbers.
or those First Chronicles, first section. Usually Leviticus, they wear out.
Yeah, I remember.
It gets boring.
I remember
being blunt about it.
specifically when I was I was not a Christian, but I wanted to read the whole Bible. And I was like, well, I'm going to pick up in the New Testament. And is it the first chapter in Matthew, which is just the names?
Yeah.
I didn't get through the first chapter of Matthew. I ended as like, okay, I'm not doing this.
Yeah, and so when you have the audio in your ears and you're looking at the page, like you can see how many more names are coming if you're not super focused on what the names are, and it's just going to keep going whether you're fully comprehending all the names or not. So it just gives you like a view of like how long are you going to go through the recounting of how much silver there was in Judah at the time. So
the dimensions of the temple and all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. So for me, that was like, okay, they're going to list off names for 30 seconds here, and then we'll carry on with the story. So I thought that was tremendously helpful.
Right.
And then the other piece is there's the piece of time and quiet are things that really were helpful in that frame. And because I was saying, like, I just got married, we had no kids yet, I could stay up through the night, and I could, my wife would run to the store, and I would have multiple hours in a row to just sit there and do this thing I was doing.
You had a week
So
off from
now-
work, if I
yeah.
remember correctly, also, right?
Yeah, that frame between.
Yeah, that's
Christmas
right.
and
You
New
were,
Year
yeah, it was
is-
natural. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, so that's always really helpful. It's difficult with kids, obviously. You got to carve out time after hours or
Right.
before hours. But yeah, so that's kind of the mechanism that was used. I would use Evernote to take any notes I wanted to take, or because when you're going through a sprint, there's, my dad reads the Bible in a year, but he spends 2 hours in it every day, but he's going back and forth looking for like, oh, I didn't remember this, or like cross referencing something else. When you're doing it like this, there's no going back because the audio's rolling. You're going forward whether you want to or not. So I would take little notes and say like, okay, here's something I'd want to look into later.
Right.
But yeah, that's all the tools.
Did you have a point where you struggled to say, I'm going to pull this off, and then maybe another point where it's like, okay, I've done this enough. I'm finishing this. This is going to work. Did you have any doubts along the way?
Yeah. So, this is something that people have asked me before too. It's like, there's this thing we say in sales is that time kills all deals. And so, when you make a commitment yesterday to do something and you're 1/6 done the next day, it's like, it's not as difficult to keep that commitment if it's not the time duration of the commitment. It's not there that long. If I was to say, I think it's, this is up to the beholder on how true this is, but I think when you make long-term commitments, it's more difficult than short-term firm commitments. So for me, it was like, yeah, I can do this in 6 days if I just hoof it along. I've got time. It would be more difficult for me to do it over, like you hear people do the 12 months. That would be harder for me than the 6 days, I think.
Right.
Interesting. All right, so you finished it in 6 days, and Rick joked in our previous podcast, or the one before, I can't remember which, you said, I mentioned he read it in 6 days, and then
And
you
on
said,
the seventh day, you rested.
yeah. So did you like crash, or was it like, okay, let's go move on,
Yeah, I was doing this for, 10, 12 hours a day for multiple days. And that was like I was drinking Mountain Dew at the time, and I really don't even drink Mountain Dew anymore. Because I think when you turn 30, like your taste buds for Mountain Dew turn off.
Yeah. That's a young man's game.
That is a young man's game. So I just was like, I've been, just going down this hall, and I think I slept for 10, 12 hours the next day.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is cool at the time. You could swing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd admit, if I went through 6 days through that kind of schedule of reading the Bible, I'd be like, I don't think I need to read today. I think I've earned it.
It takes about 80 hours to read through the Bible, so this is entirely doable for folks if they want to take on this challenge. I mean, we've got more than 80 hours in a week by far, so this is something that can be done. I want to just also mention, this is the way, what you did is the way we've read the Bible the past 2 years. Chase and I read 3 years ago, is we used an Audible Bible and then followed along in our physical Bible, and that's what we do to this day every morning as a family, which we've done it 2 years as a whole family, all 6 of us now. We're starting
Very cool.
year number 3. We're this week we started year number 3 to do this, and it is phenomenal to hear it and to see it using both of those senses. I think it was brilliant that you did it that way. It helps keep you on pace. It's really good stuff. So thanks for sharing that part of it that I think I want to encourage people to consider increasingly, is to use audio Bibles along with following along physically with the physical Bible with your eyes over the text. It's a great thing to do. And it also helps if you just speed it up just some. I'm sure you had an opportunity on that app to put it like 1.5 or 1.75 or something like that. Is that what you did too? Or
yeah, and to piggyback on the idea about like getting stuck in the Old Testament, if there's a page and a half of names and counts of things, you can turn that up to 1.5 for that, or
we did that.
If you like, yeah,
we did 1.75, I think, for the names and all that, the begats.
Yeah,
so.
But you get the picture, right? Like,
yeah.
There was no corner cut. You just did names fast.
all the Israelites in heaven are like, you really speeded up on my name? That was mine.
So
they're up there. They're not worried about their name. I
That's
think.
right.
the reason why we read the Word is to know the Lord and to enable the Word to bear fruit in our lives. Tell us about how that impacted you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a not that old of a claim. I can't remember who said it, but you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Right.
And at this frame, we had just moved to Dallas, and we didn't know very many people. So like the vacuum of those 5 people were, in my mind, very glaring. So I was like, well, if I can sub the Bible in for one of those entities, I think I'll be on a good start for my other 4.
Interesting.
So I was just like, and there's this other concept that my dad always talks about, is that the world is influencing you, whether you want it to or not. Like if you have a computer, if you drive to work and see billboards, if you watch the baseball game, the commercials and the announcers, everything is an influence on you in one direction or another.
Yeah.
So I could take this one influence that I knew was good, and it could, put me up 100 points on the 100 out of 100 score for positive influence. So I just wanted to plug that in, and it bears fruit, like you're saying, because I would find myself in situations where I would remember something that was similar to this from this experience. And the other thing is, when you're putting forth that type of time and effort into something, you naturally want to talk about it. So like I found myself talking about the Bible all the time to anyone who would listen to it, which is, wasn't something I foresaw, but it's just top of mind, tip of the tongue, and it's what I was interested in the moment. And you talk about the things you're interested in.
Right.
So I found that to be interesting as well.
Yeah, so in that situation, you're not necessarily, because I think some fears that some Christians have is, I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who's always hitting somebody over the head with the Bible. But from this perspective, if you're just filling yourself with the Word, you just can't help but be, I was just reading, somebody says something, and you say, I was just reading that in the Bible, something very similar, and you just bring up a verse. So now it's not you trying to hit them upside the head with the Bible. It's just, it's outflowing from you. That's pretty interesting.
Right. Yeah, and it's, if someone asks you a question, or, they're unsure about something, like you can be careful with how you apply this to other people as well. This exercise is to apply to yourself, but then there will be situations where you are available to help someone understand something or give a biblical take. And I found that to be tremendously helpful as well.
So Lee, we've got listeners, we got people who are going to watch the video. We have some listeners who are seeing this and maybe they think, hey, I want to try that out. Do you have any tips, having gone through this, and I don't know if you've done it again since, but tips for someone who's never done this before, or maybe who's maybe excited about this and maybe they want to tackle something, tips that they can either consider to do prior to, jumping into reading the whole Bible in a very short amount of time, that might be able to help them out.
And I think the answer to this question, Lee, also will apply to people who I've seen where the 90-day Bible reading plan is considered very intense for a lot of people, and they want to try to tackle that. They've read through the Bible in a year, but now they're going to do it in 90 days, or even a 30-day plan. I've seen some people talk about that. I think some of the principles you learned from doing this 6-day speed read would apply to help some folks like that as well.
Yeah. So what I would tell you is people learn and commit to things in different ways. And so the first piece of making this easier is the audio piece and the physical piece at the same time. Because there will be people that they'll get the audio on and they'll be like, they'll just kind of, their eyes will glaze over because they learn through audio. Right. And then there are people that block out the audio because they learn best through text. Both those are fine. Wherever you're at, however you can get this done, game on. The other thing I would say is there are people that are motivated differently. So for me, I could do this by myself. I didn't need any outside influences. But what I find in nature is people want to go together. So since I've done this original Bible read, I think about 5 years ago, I have read the Bible 10 times by my current count, and the previous 9 have been with other people. that say, I want to try to go through, and I say something to the effect of, early on, this might sound a little weird, but I would say, like, I'll race you. And I would get on that Bible app, the thing where you can like put on the canonical plan on the, I think it's called the Bible app. And then every day it'll like show where you are. And by like January 3rd, I would be on day 107 or something like that. And, there are people that are motivated like that, but then there's people that want to be motivated by the long haul and say, just go with me one day at a time.
Right.
And we'll get there. And, there's other folks that maybe have been through a few times and they're just looking for a fresh light on a known entity. With like my parents, for instance, would be folks that have read through the Bible countless times. But now they're on the canonical, not the canonical plan, the chronological plan. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it like just gives a fresh light to something, something familiar.
Right.
I think any of those tactics are good. You just have to know who you are, who your friends are, and you can kind of tailor something that works for you guys. But at the end of the day, it's about seeing how much of this word you can get in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece is like, there are a lot of times in my life where I felt like I want to recapture some of that goodness from that original read where I felt so good to be doing this, where I'll be listening to some music and I'm like, hey, this isn't a good influence, and then I'll go try to find something new. And that, it kind of bleeds over into other things if it's successful. So I would say, if you're going to start, you don't want to feel like you failed, like commit to it, go with someone if that helps you, and just try to find some time and block it out, and you can do it for sure. And this is, having done a podcast of my own, this is always one of those things you're cautioned not to do. But I would say, if you want to read the Bible and you can't find anyone to go with, or, they could probably call you first, Brett, but find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'll go with you again. Like I said, I've been through with a whole bunch of people, and it's always fun. I haven't been disappointed one time. And I'll let you know, Brett, when I get disappointed, because I'm going to need some pep talk or something.
There you go.
There you go. Well, hey, Lee, thank you so much. And that's a very generous offer. You're very gracious for you to offer yourselves to the listeners out there. Hey, I'll be your accountability partner, whatever you want to call it, for getting through this thing and coach or whatever. So I really appreciate your time. This has been so good, and there's so many more questions I want to ask you about this. Maybe we can do it again sometime. I would love to have you back on the program and ask more some of the theological implications of your reading the Scripture. Because I mean, and folks can go to my blog and find your name, Lee Corning, Read Through the Bible in 6 days. I can't remember the exact title of my blog post from 4 or 5 years ago. You share some really cool insights of what you learned in terms of who God is, and so maybe we can talk about that sometime as well. But thanks so much for your time, Lee, and for coming on the podcast. And look forward to talking to you again, brother. But
Lee, let me say this. I don't know if this is something that you might be interested in, but maybe the last 15 seconds or 30 seconds of this segment, if you want to share any of your social media things that people want to follow you on,
anything like that we can promote for you, we'd love to do that
for sure.
So.
Yeah, so I'm not much of a social media presence, but you can find me on any of the standard apps. Just Lee Corning, Corning spelled CORNING. I'm love to get involved with other people going on the same journey I am, wherever they happen to be in the world. But I just want to say thanks to you guys for having me on. It's a fun thing to do. I think you guys will do great. I've been encouraged by Brett driving around in his cars, making videos for years, and the blog and all those types of things. So I think this will just be the next stone on top of that pile. So good stuff, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, Lee. Appreciate you, my friend. God bless.
God bless, Lee. Take care.
Talk soon.
Wow, I really enjoyed talking to Lee.
Oh, that was good.
It was really good. In fact, I think we're going to have him back.
There's a bunch of things that he said, a few things that I wish we had time to dig into. So hopefully we can have him back.
We're going to have to come back and pick up more with him on that. But it's been a great show. Enjoyed it. Genesis 12 through 20. We'll talk about that next week. We're also scheduled to have a special guest on as well next week. So that'll be good. Rick, anything else you want to share?
No, I would just say stay tuned for the guest coming up next week. Hopefully everything will work out. But we will be here, and we will, as Brett mentioned, Genesis 12 through 20. So how about if you guys are going to go ahead and be reading ahead so that we can all be prepared, post some notes into our comments. What things are jumping out at you guys, some things that are highlighting, that you would like to highlight, or how the Lord is speaking to you in that passage, and we can maybe discuss that in the next week's episode.
One other thing, we'd really encourage you, it'd mean a whole lot to us if you've enjoyed these first two introductory podcasts and this first official podcast episode. Would you spread the word for us? That'd mean a lot. It's a great time to enter into following this podcast and going through the whole Word of God together. So if you know someone you think would benefit from this or really be blessed by it, I want to encourage you to spread the word. Let them know. We're going through the whole Bible in 3 years, and it's going to be a great time. So thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. God bless.
God bless.
All right. Wrap. Good.
The filter that you had on that turned you guys into doodles,
Like it.
that was super cool.